As you can see, my talk is about the folklore of the Hobs, the Hobmen, particularly the little Hobmen that are found on my native North Yorkshire moors. And I will begin with a confession. I had a weird childhood. Purely by dint of the fact that I grew up in the 1970s, and I think lots of us that grew up in the 1970s will testify that it was a little bit curious. It was an era when folklore, folk music, seemed to be prevalent throughout our schooling, throughout the TV and the books that we read. I grew up reading books by Susan Cooper, by... where's my little dinker? There it is. Seniors who are in Cheshire will have a little bit of Alan Garner. I grew up with the books of Alan Garner, whose books are absolutely rooted in folklore and in the landscape of his native Cheshire. When I grew up in the 70s and 80s, I kind of applied them to my native North Yorkshire. And it was a time when, you know, the BBC's Time and Tune programmes for schools would be filled with tales of Twigwitch, the tree spirit. You could watch any children's TV programme of the era and they would be... these stories of stone circles and strange pagan rites were considered perfectly acceptable entertainment for the under-5s in the 1970s. Quite. And there was this little whiff of gentle paganism that seemed to drift across the parky floors of primary schools all over the country, which makes it all the more curious. And it makes this spirit of folk-infused oddness. I'd never heard of the North Yorkshire Hobs until 2010. Despite growing up in this era of folky oddness and despite growing up at the foot of the North Yorkshire moors, the Hobs were just never part of my childhood, never part of the culture of North Yorkshire when I was growing up there. And it took until 2010 when I went on a walk and I discovered on the moors this. It's a marker stone. Nothing unusual about that. There are lots of marker stones on the North Yorkshire moors. If you want to go looking for this one, if you're that way inclined, you can find it OS reference NZ646124. Make a note of that. It's basically on top of, it's called Gisborough Moor. It's near a village called Commondale, which is the most staggeringly brilliant village. It's you could go to Commondale and be forgiven for thinking you'd gone through a time portal. About 1954. It's a beautiful and curious place. So it's about half an hour's walk from Commondale village, and I just chanced upon it, and I was intrigued by the markings upon it. So, I don't know, can you read the writing on that at all? Can you see it? I'll point it out. There's an S on the top there. It's the letter S. And then that inscription there, Hob on the Hill. It says on that marker stone, Hob on the Hill. So here I am, 2010, I'm 38 years old. I've never heard of the Hobs, I had no idea what they were doing on a hill in North Yorkshire. I was intrigued by the carvings that I found. Now, some of the carvings on this stone are fairly easily explained. So if we look on this side of it, the S is for Skelton. It's just an area of East Cleveland, up on the moors, because it's a marker stone, so it's the stone between two different areas of East Cleveland. The S is for Skelton. On the other side of the stone, this is the same stone viewed from the back. That looks at first glance like a C on the top, but it's not, it's a G. It's for Gisborough. So it's just a marker stone between the areas of Skelton and Gisborough. On the bottom of this side of it, RC 1798. Which took a little bit more research, but again, there's nothing too unusual about it. RC was Robert Challoner, who was the local landowner, who would have erected this stone, basically to mark the edge of his land. He was on the Gisborough side, though, so this stone is saying, Robert Challoner, in 1798, put this stone here to say, this is the end of my area of land. He was a top toff, Robert Challoner. He was, well, we can give him a boo here if you like. He was a wealthy banker, Robert Challoner. Ooh. And he later went on to become MP for Richmond. And he was actually born in 1776, so he's only 22 years old when these stones are being put up in his honour. But it was the name on the other side of the hill that fascinated me. So Hob on the hill on there, so didn't know what it was at all, didn't know what a hob was, no idea what it was doing on a hill near Commondale. So I did what any sensible, right-thinking person would do. I went online and ignored everything that I saw there, because the internet is unreliable. I bought a book. I went online and I bought a book, and I bought this brilliant folklore Bible. It's called The Law of the Land. By Jennifer Westwood, Jacqueline Simpson, and it's just, I recommend, if you haven't got one of these, go and find one and keep it by your car seat. It's a glorious toilet read, just dip into it as and when you need to, it's wonderful. So I looked up Hobs in there, and I found out, well, quite a lot, about these little hairy men. Some stories have them as actual physical beings, in other stories they are spirits, but they lived on the fringes of northeastern communities. They included... Oh, hang on. There we go. And they're often quite helpful. In the Law of the Land, we hear of quotes. It says, in Yorkshire, notable Hob territory, Hobs included spirits who lived in and did household chores, and some who, like the Hobman of Mask-on-Sea, lived outside human society and safeguarded the community. I was so fascinated by these stories that I ended up making a documentary for BBC Tees, my local BBC radio station, who I work for anyway. I talk rubbish for a living, which is a wonderful way to do it. But I made a documentary for BBC Tees called Worms, Witches and Boggarts, about some of these stories. And I approached British Folklore Society, asking if they could put me in touch with the lady who'd written this book, and fabulously they did. And I just had a wonderful chat on the phone with Jacqueline Simpson, who is, I think she's about 86, 87 years old now. And she said she would be delighted to do the interview, but she couldn't do it on Tuesday afternoons because she worked in a charity shop in Worthing on Tuesday afternoons, which I thought was very sweet. But I had a really good chat on the phone with Jacqueline, and I basically asked her if I was right in thinking that lots of the Hobs found in North Yorkshire attach themselves to local farms. And you'll notice this little clip of me chatting to Jacqueline that I get a slight telling off for having a dirty mind. Hang on, there we go. Is that play? Oh, have we got sound?
It is indeed right, and this is typical of this particular type of fairy being. In Sussex we call it a puck. In Scandinavia they call it a nissy, which is a nickname for Nicholas, just like Hob is a medieval nickname for Robert.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, all over Europe you find them. The general term is house spirits. They embody the luck of the farm. They are kind of invisible workmen who will help in farm jobs and will also punish farm servants if they are lazy and aren't working properly. And all they require in return is a bowl of porridge or milk, bread and milk or something of that sort. But anyway, they work for their food, and they get extremely angry or alternatively much too stuck up if somebody gives them clothes.
This is the intriguing thing, is that as far as I can see, the northeastern Hobs tended to be naked or at least very scantily dressed. Would that have been the source of a little bit of scandal around the time? Is that a bit of spice to proceedings?
I have never thought of it that. I suppose... I don't think so. I think it's just a mark of their poverty and a sort of badge of the fact that they are working. You get the same thing with the Scottish brownie and with the Scandinavian nissies and tomties that I was talking about just now. And always the story is that somebody sees them at work, thinks, oh, poor little fellow, what miserable ragged clothing, I will give him some clothes. And then, unexpectedly, that's the end. two possible motivations. One, that it makes him too proud to work. Pixie's fine and Pixie's gay, Pixie now will fly away. Or an Icelandic one, do they think I'm going to get my lovely new suit dirty? I'm off.
So essentially we've got these stories of elusive, hairy little men being very common all across Europe. And the stories are remarkably similar. They attach themselves to a farm, they merrily thresh corn in a barn overnight for no reward other than a bowl of milk, and they become mortally offended, usually never returning, if farmers attempt to repay their efforts by leaving out any kind of clothing to cover their nakedness, because they felt they were being treated as ordinary farm labourers if farmers did that. Or, as Jacqueline points out, they now had clothes so nice that they didn't want to work anymore because they'd ruined their nice new clobber. So I started reading more and more about these stories, and I became rather fascinated by them. Some Hobs very helpful, like the ones that worked on the farms. Some of them could be very, very mischievous as well. And the story that I came across over and over again is a story that became known to me as the flitting story. Flitting. I'm going to let Robin Butler tell you this story. Let's see if we can find Robin. Robin is a blacksmith. Robin is 85 years old and grew up with this story. As far as I know, Robin has spent his entire life in the tiny village of Kirby Moorside in Farmdale on the North Yorkshire moors. And I will let Robin tell you this. He has the most amazing voice. No, there's Robin. That's Robin outside his old blacksmith's forge, which is now part of Rydale Folk Museum, which we'll come to later on. But here's Robin telling the flitting story.
They called this Hobben. He lived in Farmdale in this farm, and he caused nothing but trouble. So farmer's wife and farmer, they decided they would flit. They would go somewhere else. So they gets the horse and cart, a rully, loads it up, and they were going to leave Hob behind. And they get sets off, and they're going away on the road. And so they saw somebody, why are you going? Oh, we're flitting. And then a voice back at cart says, aye, we're flitting. And farmer it was, oh no, he's not there in amongst furniture. And so said, yes, I'm here. Ah, well, we might as well flit back home. So they turned round and went back because they couldn't get rid of him.
So there you go. That is essentially the story. A mischievous Hob loose in the house. The family decide to pack all of their worldly goods on the back of the trailer and move away. The neighbour says, I see you're flitting. You're flitting, you're leaving, you're moving. They say, yes, we are. At which point the Hob, who's hidden amongst the furniture on the back of the trailer, says, yes, and I'm coming with you. There's no point. We might as well go back home again. Remember that. We'll come back to that tale, because it has a fascinating little twist, that one. I'll mention Rydale Folk Museum. Hang on. No, we won't go to Rydale Folk Museum. It's where, I thought I had a picture of it, clearly I don't. It's where Robin works. Robin's blacksmith's forge is now based at Rydale Folk Museum. It's a place that was founded in the late 1960s by an extraordinary Yorkshireman called Bert Frank, who realised in the 60s that the old ways of farming life on the North Yorkshire moors were completely dying out, and the old equipment, all of the old farming gear, the scythes and what have you, were being just thrown out, just left to rot, to rust. He began gathering them together from the farmers of the area, and what started out as a tiny exhibition in his garage has become Rydale Folk Museum, and it's if you're ever passing through North Yorkshire, it's worth a visit. It's an absolutely extraordinary collection of just testaments to a way of life that's now long gone in North Yorkshire. They're a complete 16th century buildings there that have been completely put back together and moved across Yorkshire, and it's extraordinary. Anyway, so Robin works there, and they've kind of adopted the flitting story as their own. There is a resident hob at Rydale Folk Museum who is called Elfie, and if you go to Rydale Folk Museum, you will get basically a leaflet called Elfie's Story, and it tells that story of the hob that hides on the back of the farmer's cart, and it applies it to the folk museum itself. And kids are encouraged to go around and look for Elfies, little Elfies trail around the museum. It's just a fabulous thing. So this story has become really, really rooted in North Yorkshire culture. Right, so I was intrigued to find out how old the actual Hobman stories were. Now clearly, 1798, belief in the Hobs was widespread enough for that stone that I found on Gisborough Moor. It's got 1798 on it, and it's got Hob on the Hill on it. So in 1798, belief was widespread enough for their name to be carved upon that. But it does seem that their influence had been deeply felt in the region for many centuries before that. This is where we turn to one of the best chroniclers of Teesside and North Yorkshire folklore who ever lived. Let me have a little look. Hang on. Working here. Oh no, there's Rydale Folk Museum. Sorry, I missed out. Right, that's. If you're passing through, look for it. It looks like that. And there's that. So yeah, 1798. Hob on the Hill. It's there and there. And there is our chronicler of North Yorkshire folklore. He's called Canon Atkinson. The Reverend J.C. Atkinson. He was a vicar based in Danby, up on the North Yorkshire moors, and in 1891 he wrote a beautiful book called 40 Years in a Moorland Parish. I've got it there. It's a very lyrical account of his time working as a vicar in a quite a remote part of the North Yorkshire moors. 40 Years in a Moorland Parish, Reminiscences and Researches in Danby in Cleveland. Now in this book, he recalled his visit to an elderly female parishioner who regaled him with a little rhyme. I'll attempt to do this in authentic, traditional North Yorkshire folk speak, but I'm from the posh end, so it's not that. Here we go. Gin Hobman how naught but a hardened hamp, he'll come nae more now that a berry nor stamp. Right. If you're baffled by that, don't worry, because Canon Atkinson was a little bit bemused by it too. Because despite appearances, not all of this archaic dialect belongs to North Yorkshire folk speech. It's essentially another warning not to offend your resident hob by leaving him work clothes. So, give Hobman no heart but a hardened hamp, he'll come nae more, now that a berry nor stamp. The word hamp is a smock. It's a peasant's smock. Give him naught but a hardened hamp. And the word berry means to thresh. But neither of those are North Yorkshire words, which confused Canon Atkinson. He actually writes in the book, these words have no actual meaning to the old dame who repeated the rhyme to me. And Canon Atkinson concluded, the word hamp, the peasant's smock, seems to be clearly Old Danish in form and origin. So as far as Canon Atkinson was concerned, these stories were Scandinavian, brought over by Vikings, by Viking invaders about 1,000 years earlier. But brilliantly, the old lady that told him this rhyme, the old lady he spoke to himself in 1891, absolutely believed that they were true. And Canon Atkinson writes, it was impossible to doubt for a moment her perfect good faith. She told all with the most utter simplicity and the most evident conviction that what she was telling was matter of faith, and not at all the flimsy structure of fancy or fable. So she told Canon Atkinson this old Hobman rhyme and believed it was absolutely true that hobmen came to farmers' barns overnight. You mustn't offend them by leaving them clothes. So 1,000 years of hob stories we're looking at here. If they were brought by Vikings, that was 1,000 years before the lady in Canon Atkinson's parish was still firmly believing that these stories were real. I thought at this juncture it was time to call in an archaeologist. This man is an archaeologist. He's called Peter Rowe, and he's lovely, and he works for Tees Archaeology. This is Peter in his office in Hartlepool. So I asked Peter about the Hob stone that I'd found, the Hob on the Hill marker stone that I'd found on Gisborough Moor, which, as you recall, was labelled 1798. That was when the stone was put up. But I thought, that's just when the stone was put up. How long could that hill have been called Hob on the Hill before then?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of place name evidence is, again, it can be fairly speculative. Certainly, the Anglo-Saxons and the Scandinavians after them were very keen on descriptive place names. So you pick that up in a lot of places around here, like, for example, Acklam in Middlesbrough means the place of the oak trees. Places like Red Marshall is just Reed Marsh. And I think things like Hob Hill is just a descriptive name, describing it. It's a hill, and it's associated with a personal name, perhaps Hob, or it's got this connection with the folklore of goblins, hobgoblins. Again, there's nowhere where we'll see that written down in the history books. These places weren't really connected with settlements, so nobody's taxing the place. It doesn't get written down in the Domesday Book. Yeah, I would say there's a good chance the Hob names are Anglo-Scandinavian or Anglo-Saxon. So we're talking from around 600 to 900 AD, that sort of bracket, and if not earlier.
So there we go. The stone was put up in 1798. That's when the markings date from. But it seems the place name itself, Hob on the Hill, had been around for, well, possibly 1,000 years by then. The Anglo-Saxons and the Anglo-Scandinavians, 600 to 900 AD, were as Peter says, a very literal kind of people. They knew this particular hill had the story of a hob attached to it, and therefore they called it Hob on the Hill. So it's possible that the stories even predate the Anglo-Saxons and the Anglo-Scandinavians. They just knew that the story was there, and they gave the hill that name, because that's what they did. They were literal. And it isn't the only place that has a name that's connected with these stories, certainly not around North Yorkshire, around the Teesside area. So we have places called, there we go, that's it, Obtrush Rook. This is called Obtrush Rook. Again, it's in quite a remote part of the North Yorkshire moors. It's not that far away from Rydale Folk Museum, so you know, if you do go there, make a day of it. Go and find Obtrush Rook as well. I got hopelessly lost looking for it. As you can see, it's a small stone circle. It's a Bronze Age burial ground. And as Peter said to me, Obtrush Rook, it's probably a corruption of Hob Rush. And Rook is a Scandinavian word. It means a pile of something, a mound of something. So it's stones, you would imagine. And then we've got places like Hob Hill, which is in Saltburn by the sea again on the North Yorkshire coast. Boggle Hole is near Whitby. There's a youth hostel in Boggle Hole who are very good at playing on the legend. But again, Hob, Boggle, Bogus, they're all the same elemental creatures, all places associated with the legends of Hobs. There are some really nice coastal variations on this story, actually. I will on our little travelogue of North Yorkshire here, scenic North Yorkshire, I will take you to this place. There's me looking bloody frozen. This is in the middle of October. This is Runswick Bay, again on the North Yorkshire coast. It's not a million miles away from Whitby. And there is a hobman associated with Runswick Bay who has a very curious little hobby. He lives in a cave on the seafront, which is still, I mean, there is a cave on the seafront. Some in the village will tell you it isn't the original cave, which has long since worn away, but there is undoubtedly a very conspicuous cave on the seafront at Runswick Bay. And the story of the hob associated with it is that he lives in there, and not to put too fine a point on it, he can cure whooping cough, which is not a bad trick if you can pull it off. So I went to Brunswick Bay on this particularly freezing day, and I met a wonderful lady called Rose Rylands, who is a professional storyteller. Can we see Rose? There we go. There's the cave. And there is Rose standing in front of it, looking just as bloody freezing as I did. And I asked Rose to tell me the version of the Brunswick Bay Hob story that she knew.
They say that the women used to bring their children down here, and they would recite a rhyme. But before they did that, they had to light a fire from driftwood and seaweed. Then they would hold the babe in their arms and walk clockwise around the fire, calling out this line, this rhyme. It's a hob, hole, hob. My bairn's got kink cough. Take it off. Take it off. Hob, hole, hob. My bairn's got kink cough. Take it off. Take it off. And they really believed that this wild creature, this sort of mixture of myth and reality, this hob would cure their children. And I suspect that this all took place at a time when magic and a deep belief in witchcraft and mysticism ran through the daily fabric of life in this country.
I once did a radio topic on names that your family used to give illnesses and diseases, because that's the kind of fun afternoon show I run on BBC Tees. And kink cough was suggested by quite a few older listeners. Kink cough was very much an older North Yorkshire term for whooping cough. So yeah, there's the rhyme. My bairn's got kink cough, take it off, take it off. Dance around the fire, recite that, and the hob would cure your children of whooping cough. So that's the gist of it. For the best part of 1,000 years, people in North Yorkshire absolutely believed in the very literal truth of these little men attaching themselves to local communities, be it farms or villages or caves, always on the fringes of society, but still part of it in some way, doing little jobs overnight, generally when people couldn't see them, and then becoming a bit nasty or a bit mischievous if anybody upset them. So having established this, I was then fascinated as to why I'd never heard of them as a kid, and when the influence of the Hobs began to wane. They were so widespread for 1,000 years, but for me as a kid in the 1970s, growing up in this actual area, I just never heard of them. And it seems like the turn of the 20th century was something of a watershed for the poor Hob. And that by 1905, even the once legendary Elfie, who was the Hob that the Rydell Folk Museum have adopted, he was the rock star Hob of his day. But by 1905, even he was firmly residing in the Where Are They Now file. Because that year saw the publication of another book, another fabulous book. I think I've got, is that on there? There we go, The Evolution of an English Town by Gordon Home. There's my copy of it as well, which just to confuse you is a completely different copy to the one that I've put up there, but it is the same book. The English town whose evolution Gordon Home discusses is Pickering, from the beautiful place in North Yorkshire. And Gordon Home reports in 1905 in this book that after most careful inquiry during the last 2 years throughout the greater part of Farmdale, only one person has been met with who remembered hearing of this once widely known dwarf. Poor old Elfie, by 1905, is completely forgotten. So it's possibly hardly surprising that by the time I started exploring the moors 70 years later, tales of the humble Hob had drifted into the realms of fantasy and children's books and the like. But I sense a Hob comeback on the horizon. Because in 2010, the same year that I discovered the Hob on the Hill stone up on Gisborough Moor, I became aware that two Teesside artists, AJ Garrett and Rebecca Little, they're heroic-looking young people. What a wonderful thing. Two Teesside artists have become so fascinated by these little nuggets of local folklore that they ran what they called a mop-top hob shop in an empty shop unit in Stockton-on-Tees. They do basically travelling DIY art installations, and in 2010 they based one of them in a shop unit in Stockton-on-Tees on the stories of the Hobs. Let's have a little listen. Oh no, there it is. That's what they did in the empty shop unit. You see, local kids have been in making hobs out of plasticine, which I think is rather lovely.
So in not the too distant past, we had a pop-up shop in Stockton, and we did a little museum of Stockton's history, and a part of it we did focus on the Hobmen, and we had a little section called the Mop-Top Hob Shop, and in that section it's mainly little kids making plasticine models of Hobmen, multicoloured Hobmen really.
Where did you find out about the Hobmen?
That was from book learning, good old-fashioned book learning, because when we had that project coming along and it was sort of local history, but I didn't want to go on about the invention of the friction match or like that machine, what's it called, the train. We wanted like more weird stuff, and that led us down the path of the Hobmen.
Remember which book you found it in?
We went to a Middlesbrough reference library and we just took out, we just looked for hours, didn't we, and photocopied pages and things, and there was a lot of, because you couldn't find anything on the internet, it was all through the books.
So you'd never heard of Hobmen before that? It was never part of your upbringing? Nobody had mentioned them on Teessides?
No, I think I've got vague memories of going to like a museum or something else Motherly, and there being like something about the one that hides in the guy's cart when he's trying to move house. I remember that, and that's about it really.
What did kids make of the Hobmen? Were they intrigued by them?
Yeah, they were really attracted by them, and we got pictures somewhere. They made quite a few. It's like a Hob community.
Yeah, definitely. No, kids just take to it. So kids are just like, okay, so these little creatures and they live in the countryside and by the river, by the sea, and some of them are good, some of them are evil. And the kids are like, right, okay, and then just go for it.
It's quite an echoey hall in here, and I've just presented the fastest talking, strongest Teesside accent you've probably ever heard in your life. So I basically say that, yeah, when they grew up as well, I mean, they're obviously a fair bit younger than me, they knew nothing about Hobs. They even went online in 2010, couldn't find anything really about North Yorkshire Hobs. This stuff had been completely lost, and it was just to be found in the likes of Gordon Home and Canon Atkinson's books. They actually kept some of the pictures that the kids did when they came into their shop unit that day. So these are local kids that knew nothing about the Hobbs stories, but they came and met AJ and Rebecca and did drawings of what they thought the Hobbs would look like, and I think these are great. There's one there. It says, "I am the evil Hobman," he's saying as he strides towards, can't see what, oh, it's Hobman House, it says on the top of the house there. That one I like, as a very traditional looking Hobman with horns, and this one appears to have a Stetson, which I think is a wonderful application of artistic license. So those, again, Hobs being passed on to a new generation here. And then Elfie, the Hob who was completely lost to Farmdale culture by 1905, he'd been totally forgotten. He's having something of a second wind as well. Because if we go to, again we're back to Rydale Folk Museum here. If we go there, Elfie's Trail, which I mentioned, it's a little treasure hunt of Hob-related artefacts scattered around the museum's grounds. And younger visitors to the museum are encouraged to go around the trail and find all the clues to Elfie's whereabouts. And I met up with the museum's director, who's called Jennifer Smith, and she followed the trail with me, and I couldn't help but notice that one of the stopping points on it, yeah, that's Elfie's house on Elfie's Trail, Rydale Folk Museum. Can anybody work out what the roof of Elfie's house is made from? Look closely. What do you think that's made from, that green roof? Anybody? Oh, this is great. I've bamboozled everyone. In a wonderful depiction of how Elfie is still as mischievous as he's ever been, it's actually the Canon Atkinson's book. It's a copy of this very book spread out like that, and Elfie has now adopted that to live in. I thought that was a wonderful little touch. And Jen, who's the director of the museum, I think she helped put it together, and she had no idea of the connection between the book and Elfie. It was utter coincidence. But I can't help but think that Elfie is still at work here. I had a chat with Jen about Elfie and about the way that the story of Elfie and the Hobs are really intriguing younger visitors to the museum these days.
Elfie's Trail, from my own point of view, is a really lovely way to try and get children particularly to engage with the museum's collection, the area's history. So it's a bit like a hook really to get them in. You know, it's something designed at literally their own level because it's low down to the ground, and it's about giving children a way to get their eye in as well as them learning something about history. So it's to use a museum term, is an engagement tool. Yeah. But really, it's a nice, fun thing for the family to be able to do that provides a bit of interest and structure when you're going around the museum with young children.
And do kids have a fascination with Elfie? Do they want to know more about him and find out?
Yeah, I think they do. You know, and I think it's shown in the fact that actually rarely do we hear that people haven't finished the Elfie Trail. They've gone all the way with it, you know, and want a bit more. And I think it's useful for, you know, it encourages discussion among families. So, you know, even if they're asking mum and dad about Elfie and they don't really know, it doesn't matter if they make something up because it's about the fact that we've inspired the conversation. So yeah, you know, I think people do want to know more about Elfie. It's a curious, mysterious character, isn't it?
I think that's a lovely way to keep folklore evolving. You know, the parents, the kids don't know that much about Elfie anymore, but make it up. I think that's glorious. So as you can probably tell, the Hobs have become a little bit of an obsession for me in recent years. I put them in a BTT's documentary, which seemed to get a little bit of attention, and I ended up, as a result of that, turning the Hobs section of the documentary into an article for the 14 Times, which I'm sure lots of you read on a regular basis. So I was thrilled to do that. And I mentioned a little twist in the story of the flitting episode. The Hob hidden on the back of the farmer's carts, trying to move house. But the Hob comes with them, so there's no point in moving house, just turn around and go back again. And I put that in the article in the 14 Times, and a couple of months later, there was a letter. There was a letter from a Norwegian correspondent who'd read my article about the flitting Hob on the back of the cart. So this is from Niels Erik Grand, who lives in Oslo. So Bob Fischer's Hobnobbing with the Hobs article recounts the tale of the Hob that followed the farmer who tried to move away from him. This folkloric motif is apparently found all over Europe, and we Norwegians know about it from a well-known children's song. I won't attempt to do the original Norwegian version that he sent in, but he has very handily put a translation in there. And the man would from the Niffy move, but the journey became him to no avail. For high on the cartload, the Niffy laughed. I think we're moving today, we two. I think we're moving today. So as Niels points out, the Niffy is the same entity as the Swedish Tomte and obviously Fischer's Hob, one of the little people who is attached to a farm and can be both benevolent and malevolent. The word flitting, which I had absolutely thought was a North Yorkshire word, because it just sounds North. Flit it, yeah, what flit? It's what's it?
I said Scouseby always.
Oh, do you really? Because he says it's a Norwegian word. Ah! The word flitter, F-L-Y-T-T-E, means move. Norwegian, right? It's come down with the Vikings, I think. Is it? How fabulous!
I'll give you a connection.
Oh yeah, no, please. So yeah, it's a Norwegian word, and it corresponds to the flitting in Fischer's story. The provenance of the song is unknown, but the words and music are sufficiently modern. I would guess they are no older than the 19th century. It is, or it used to be, universally known to Norwegians. And the phrase, "the hob on the cartload," is a stock comment in Norway on situations where somebody is unsuccessfully trying to get away from something undesirable. So he gives the example. I hear Smith got a new job. Yeah, he gets much better pay, but he still spends more than he earns. Ah, the hob on the cartload, eh? It's a Norwegian expression, which just absolutely thrilled me to the core. So thank you to Niels for sending that in. Which brings us neatly to our conclusion. I'm going to finish off with a conversation that I recorded with Rose Rylands, who was the Whitby storyteller who came with me to Runswick Bay, and we explored the cave where the hob who cures whooping cough resides. That's Rose. After we'd been to Runswick Bay, we went to Boggle Hole, which I mentioned earlier again, another place name associated with the legend of a hob. We went to Boggle Hole, and Rose is a good friend of mine now. This is the first time that I've met her, but she is a good friend of mine now. If you want to seek her out, whitbystoryteller.co.uk. There you go, chuck a plug in. Rose knows her folklore. She knows her traditional story. I'm kind of a sceptical soul. I love the history of these stories and where they came from and how they were adopted by different cultures. I don't necessarily believe that they're all true, but Rose does, and absolutely, credit to her for that. I can't be sceptical about her faith in these stories at all. And Rose kind of thinks we've drifted too far away from the connection that folklore gives us to landscape as well, into a kind of mystical inner realm of the soul that Rose firmly believes in. So, although this lecture so far has been very firmly based in the factual, like every good Hobman, I'm going to turn a little bit mischievous myself. So, Boggle Hole. Look, I know no fear. No keep outside can stop me wandering around the beach on a freezing cold October evening. Picture Rose Rylands and myself standing at the edge of the sea in Boggle Hole. Semi-darkness. The waves are rolling towards us. They're crashing violently against the cliffs all around, and they're filling the caves where the boggle itself was said to hide out. Bear all of this in mind and listen to this.
Rather strangely, I had an email this spring from a gentleman who contacted me and asked me that same question. What did I know about the Boggle of Boggle Hole? He said when he was a child, he had never forgotten that he was walking down this very cliff path, down this stairway that we're standing next to right now, that stretches up from the youth hostel up onto the cliff. And he swears to me that as a child he saw a man-come creature, and he described exactly the hob. He said he didn't know what it was, but he knew that there was something about Boggle Hole and some creature, and he said, but it was so odd, and it just ran across the path in front of him. It was so swift, it was just there and it was gone like a flash. I have to confess that I haven't followed through with that particular inquiry. Sometimes it's good to leave a mystery right where it is, and because the greatest gift we were given was our deep creative imagination, and it is through there that we open the doors to the unseen realms that have been spoken about for thousands of years, that if we concentrate, we can access other realms of reality through our deep imagination. And it opens the door to the inner worlds where all these creatures dwell, both in our imagination and possibly in reality as well.
Rose Rylands, Bob Fischer, thank you very much. You've been wonderful.